Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Our buddy John emailed us about this singer. Her name is Lisa St. Lou.
Okay.
Emerging soul singer. Her new album is called Ain't No Good Man. A bunch of the Neville brothers played on it, including Aaron, and Irma Thomas sang on it. So, which did make me be like, can we get in touch with Irma Thomas?
Yeah, right.
Haven't found her yet, but working on it. Yeah, I mean, multiple Nevilles. I think even generations of Nevilles.
I mean, that's a lot of Nevilles.
It is. It's, what do you call, is that a bumper of Nevilles?
I feel like it's a gaggle.
A gaggle? If you've got Aaron, Neville.
I was going to say Neville.
I think Cyrus is the other one who plays on the record. But there's a lot of them.
Let's see. Yeah.
And here's where kind of somebody doing a commercial and going, well, it's a few, it's a payday. I'll just do it. No big deal. We'll go in a way. Every time I think of Aaron Neville, I think of him singing "The Touch, the Feel of Cotton," the fabric of our lives.
I think of him doing "I Don't Know Much, but I Know I Love You."
Okay, well, that's number 2, but right up there is.
Which I don't think either of those are the things he wants to be most known for. So I do feel like that.
Yeah. Is Zach looking up Neville and seeing what his?
No, Zach has tuned us out completely.
Yeah. Okay, it's allmusic.com and just type in Neville.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
There's Aaron, Art, Charles, Cyril, and Ivan.
Okay, Ivan was the one I was thinking of. But Aaron Neville isn't in the Neville brothers. I believe he left.
He was, right.
He was.
Point,
they're still related.
Yes.
They are still brothers.
He's still a Neville brother.
Yes.
Just no longer a Neville brother.
In the Neville brother. Capital B brothers.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Didn't he also do Somewhere Out There? Or am I confusing him
with
like
James Ingram? You always think everybody does. So, James Ingram, you always think that everybody does Somewhere Out There, and it's always James Ingram.
Right. Well, similarly, my father thinks any female singer on the radio is Gloria Estefan. So.
Oh, okay.
Apple Tree. It walks in there. Oh, isn't that Gloria Estefan? No, that's Mariah Carey. Like, you can tell the difference. Even from across the room, you can tell the difference.
You can.
In the beginning, how'd this start?
Well, Terminus started in Atlanta. We were a group of screenwriters who would get together and talk about the screenplays we were working on and slag on all the derivative crappy movies that were in the movie theaters at the time. And I can't believe that film, they got so much of a budget for such a crap film. And how can they take a book or a concept that is so great and make such a lousy film out of it? So we started writing our own screenplays, and this was in Atlanta 20 years ago. There was virtually no film business to speak of in Atlanta at the time. So we figured if we're going to get anybody to pay attention to us and consider our screenplays, we should start making comic books with them, because we were meeting in a comic book shop at the time, and there were some artists who would come in from time to time, and we would grab them when they came in the door and drag them in the back and make them draw our stuff. No, we just started saying, hey, could you illustrate an 8-page story of this screenplay that we wrote? And so we made one comic book that had like 5 stories in it. Each story was 8 pages long. It was black and white. Nobody cared about it. Nobody wanted it. And we went to a comic book convention in Atlanta called Dragon Con. It's the biggest convention in the South to this day. And we sold a couple hundred of our comics. It was like, oh, we found our audience. And so we started making longer comics and then color comics. And then we started doing animation of our comics. And then clients started to ask us to, hey, can you do that kind of comic book and that kind of animation for us? And so we started doing creative services. And so now it's 20 years later and Terminus is still going. And so that's how we got started as a company.
So were you a comic book guy? I guess that you were hanging out at a comic book shop.
No.
Does that go without saying?
No, I wasn't really a comic book guy. Like, I always liked comics because I liked the Sunday paper when I was a kid. I would come home on Sunday and, oh my God, the Sunday paper's there and it's full color and there's the Wizard of Iz and there's Wizard of Id and there's Far Side and there's Beetle Bailey. I don't know what this army thing is about because it was created during the 1940s, I think, when World War II was going on. But the humor was good. So I started reading comics, newspapers when I was a kid. But in college, there's a rich kid down the hall who would come back to the dorms every new comic book day, which I didn't know that there was a new comic book day, but he'd bring a stack of comics. And so I was like, hey, man, when you're done reading those comics, do you mind if I read them? Because, in college, you're assigned to read all kinds of books that are big and laborious and boring. So to keep myself from hating reading, I started reading those comics, and I realized that I still to this day, I'm a writer, but I read comics for the art. I love that the sequential panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, the sequential art storytelling it's a unique thing. But I realized that there's actually some pretty decent writers writing comics, writing stories and writing about concepts and characters that are really different from what you see in the mainstream media. So even so, though, I wasn't really a super duper comic book nerd or anything, but I do and definitely have an appreciation for it as an art form. So
Daniel.
No, go ahead.
So Daniel, for you, did you start off being enchanted by the wily adventures of Marmaduke, or what's your origin story?
Oh yeah, I definitely loved all those comic strips. Garfield's still my favorite. My kids watch that pretty much around the clock here. So we've got all the old Garfield cartoons. But yeah, I love the comic strips. I love the comic book characters as a kid. I was always running around with my underwear on the outside of my pants, being Batman or Superman. Had a great time, playing the games and pretending to be super. But it was really when the newer movies came out, the new, Christopher Nolan Batman series and the Avengers. They started making these, and I saw that as a great way to tell good stories for a new generation. And I've really tried to kind of study those films, see where the success was, and kind of see how they used the storytelling and brought some of those comic book elements into the cinematic world. And so now here I am kind of coming back around and fell into the comic book writing that I never expected to do. But it's been a great time so far. And I kind of was able to catch on to what Dr. Baron Bell has been doing with the Dominion series and kind of go from there in developing a very nuanced and elaborate kind of story that we're weaving together for that series, and hopefully kind of elevating it from what maybe would be, sometimes comic books can be kind of campy and goofy, but we're hoping to make something that's meaningful, and that it can be enjoyed by people of all ages, a complex story that can be enjoyed for the beautiful art and, the action and the epicness of the world, but also for the actual characters and, what they go through in their journeys.
Well, that's one of the things too, as you mentioned, it is such an art form, and it's such a wonderful vehicle, exactly as you said, to take these very complicated stories and give them in a way that's digestible for people of various ages and reading levels and attention spans. But as the creator of this art form and falling into it and pursuing it, how do you take a complex story that has all these details and pare it down into a comic book form?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's kind of our perpetual quest is to continue to do that and to make sure that we're doing it authentically. Um, Dr. Baron Bell is the creator of Dominion, and he had a very kind of broad stroke vision for what the story would be. And I've kind of come in to be more of a details guy to begin to work that out in the pages, kind of like what you're talking about there. How do you take, an elaborate story? We're kind of going the other direction maybe with this one. We're taking kind of a basic story that we're drawing from, are taking our inspiration from the biblical text in First Samuel, and we're taking those major big picture arcs that are taking place in the Bible story, and then kind of expanding them and fleshing them out to a more complex story. So I suppose I'm going the other way sometimes, and I'm sure it goes back and forth depending on what we're working on. But yeah, kind of going, what would King Saul's motivation be in this world? How are the relationships between the mother and the son, and the father and the daughter, and brother and sister, in that family? It's bringing those people into reality, bringing those characters into reality, giving them motivations of their own. And I think that that's basically where I try to take it is once you know what a character wants, what they're doing, then they begin to kind of have a life of their own inside the story, and it kind of tells you where they should go. What each of these unique comic book characters wants, and that makes for some great drama.
It seems that adapting biblical stories for comic books is a bit of a no-win situation. Very few people would ever say to you, I like the comics better than the other book, than the one you're adapting it from.
The book was much better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you mean the Word of God was much better? Okay.
So
number one bestseller, right?
Right. So how do you
It's
to go?
Was your comic inspired by God? I don't think
Right.
so. Yeah.
And
Church lady not approved.
Well, you haven't read it yet, so
yeah.
It's true. Also a good point.
That's got to be, I was going to say a heady concept, but just a rather large challenge to go, they missed some things. What can I fill in here?
Right.
How much?
I wouldn't put it that way, but yeah, so it can get a little dangerous there. But no, I would say everything that we're doing to the best of my ability is authentic and accurate to the heart of the story. To the heart of the characters. I don't think we have King Saul, for instance, doing anything that the biblical Saul wouldn't do. We're not being blasphemous or diverging from the story in that kind of a way. It's more like expanding what's already there, and kind of dramatizing it, bringing it to the surface a little bit more so that you can kind of feel what they maybe felt. So we're taking some license, but not in the big picture stuff. It's definitely,
So no motorcycles or anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and that's the thing, is that this is just loosely inspired by the book of Samuel. We're not claiming to do, a translation of the Bible or or direct adaptation of the Bible. Really, even adaptation maybe is still too strong. We're taking it as inspiration, so we take the main arc, King Saul was chosen by God. The kingdom was taken from him because of his disobedience. And so then there was this kind of unraveling of his household and things as David, assumes the throne in the story of the Bible. So we take that, and then we're kind of basing it or, allowing that to inspire how we might tell the story. So it gives us some freedom because we're not doing it as close, maybe if we did, like a TV miniseries of the story of Saul and David, you'd kind of have to be pretty, I would want to make sure that I was staying really close to what the Bible said and not taking any bunny trails or doing anything that would, be too far on the side of creative license. Cause you're telling the biblical story. You want it to be, you want to respect it, you want to respect the text, and we want to do that here still, but because of the distance that we put with it being in a sci-fi universe and it's, these anthropomorphic characters, that does give us a little bit more freedom to be able to be creative and to take some risks and some directions that we maybe wouldn't see in other biblical adaptations.
Yeah, and the good thing about me as a publisher is, Terminus Media is an entertainment company, right? So, I don't know about you guys, but my folks drug me to church when I was a kid, and the main thing that I got at church was bored. So, the great thing with this team is, I don't have to go to them and say, guys, do you want to bore people? Bore them with Shakespeare, bore them with nuclear physics, but don't bore them with these comic books that we're trying to make based on First Samuel in the Bible. And the great thing is that they're really successful at sort of looking at the story from a different perspective. Because the Sunday school version is, and then Saul was made king, and then Saul went here and did this, and whereas the story of Dominion is Saul had an anger problem, and he would try to kill people, and it's like, ooh, this is a good story. And then the team throws in a battle mech that the Princess Michael is piloting, to save the villagers and stuff. And
what chapter was that in again in the Bible? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, I don't think there are any mechs in the Bible, but and that's the great thing about this story being inspired by the biblical text is you can always go back and read the historical account of what happened there and read about the characters, and that's a good thing. If our work does nothing else other than make people say, "Hey, I'm going to go check this out and see what the actual story of this historical king of Israel and his family and his downfall." I think there's lessons to be learned there, regardless of if you're a person of faith or not. We all know that, there are timeless principles, like if you reap what you sow. If you sow anger and violence, that's what you get back. And those who live by the sword die by the sword. And that's definitely the story of Saul's life is, thinking I know better than everybody, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And
pride comes before a fall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, these big principles though that are there. I really do. In our defense, I do feel like you're not going to see any of our characters doing something you'd be like, I just don't think that would be, how it would go. It should be pretty resonant with what you'd expect from the story.
So Daniel's working on Dominion, and so Mark, as publisher, what else are you publishing? What other books are you currently working on?
This week we're releasing a book called Samson Rise, which is also based on a biblical character. And this story is more, it is inspired by the biblical text as well, but it is a closer to the actual story. And we have a debate going on, in the company. I don't know if you guys can help, see who's right or wrong in this particular debate. But right. The debate is if Samson in the Bible, if he's the Superman of the Bible, or if he's the Incredible Hulk of the Bible. So I don't know how familiar you are with that character, but right. What are y'all's thoughts on that debate?
I think he's Superman.
Yeah, Superman? I mean, the hair being sort of your kryptonite. Yeah.
Okay, you're totally wrong. You're all totally wrong.
Okay.
Delilah's your Lois Lane.
Yeah.
There you go. I kind of think that the way that Matt Baker and Daryl Pennington have depicted Samson in this particular artistic book is a little bit Wolverine at times.
Okay,
he's got a little anger problem, maybe Hulk-like, but there's some shots where he's got jumping through the thing. He's kind of like that hairy-looking tough guy as well. So.
I can get on board with that because doing research for tonight and seeing the picture, the few frames that are on your Facebook page, which are amazing. Like they're so enticing. Incredible. But yes, I could totally see little Wolverine action. Like he's kind of everybody melded together. So Samson is Samson. He's his own.
What about the jawbone, Mark? You kind of get like Thor wielding the hammer kind of the thing going on, right? True. I mean, come on, a little bit.
Yeah, yep. I think that's true. Definitely Wolverine. Because there's this one. I think it's a double page spread. Daniel can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this part in the story of Samson where he goes to get revenge because the Philistines burned his wife to death, and his father-in-law. So he goes to take revenge on them, and he picks up the jawbone of a donkey and kills 600 people. So, I mean, that's something that's kind of illustrated, not in a super violent way, but in a really creative way that just flows. And I think the Wolverine thing is probably pretty close.
Well, yeah, and I'm a minister's granddaughter, so I grew up full on, with all in church and all of it, but there's so many stories in the Bible, and a lot of incredible characters in the Bible do have anger management problems. But I feel as though you're really into an anger management phase right now with what you're doing. Is there any plans to deal with any of the characters that maybe aren't quite so mad and frustrated?
Well, I'm really looking forward to David's arrival, as we work toward that through the Dominion series. Of course, David's going to be a very unique and different kind of character, but again, we're doing our best to make that as resonant with that original source material as possible. So he's going to have quite a different take. I would say our King Saul has got the anger management issues going on. He's very narcissistic and kind of brooding. His son Jonathan is definitely been crushed by his father's big personality, and is very solemn through the opening chapters of the book. He's very very serious. And David, I think, is gonna, and the same goes for the Queen Ahinoam and the daughter Princess Michael, who they all have very strong personalities, and I'm really looking forward to the moment when David comes in and just kind of messes up their world and just ruins everything for them, because he's going to have a very different perspective on God, on the kingdom, on what his values are. They're just totally foreign to that family and just the way things were. So he'll be a little bit different, I think.
And it's true because David is like a one-man boy band, right? He had all the charisma of like NSYNC or with the Backstreet Boys or
he's
whoever.
The Justin Timberlake of them all.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the Justin Timberlake of the Bible. That's so good. That's so good. All the girls are like, "Oh, David, he's so dreamy," and he defeated Goliath. Spoilers. And he was ruddy and handsome, and it says that he played music. So he's like a rock star. So he shows up, and everybody's like, "Oh, Saul, Shmuel, whatever." So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the team pulls that off. But I feel like another job of mine, other than to say, "Hey, please don't make this boring," is to harass the team about when are we going to see some designs and some illustrations of David and Goliath, because in the Dominion world, these characters, they don't really have weapons. They have like mechs and sort of futuristic weapons. So Daniel, have you Daniel seen any of these illustrations yet? And will you send them to me if you have?
I think we do have some exclusive glimpses of David in the most recent chapter. In the collector's edition, you can see some process art, on David's costume and weapons and such, and what he's going to be doing. So yeah, you can catch that. Besides that, I think there's only just the hints that are inside the book where you see the little early signs that Goliath is on the move, and so you might have to be content with that for the moment, Mark.
It's interesting. At first blush, I could see some people saying, well, Bible stories, not my cup of tea, especially comic readers. But then the more I think about it and hearing you describe these stories, so much of it hits me as like, this is an Alan Moore story that he just hasn't gotten around to yet.
Absolutely.
No, they're deep stories. They're deep, and they have a lot. We have a lot of gold to mine from these stories, and they're human stories. So we relate to them on so many levels, and you may relate to any one of the characters that I've mentioned here more than the others. But everybody, either has experienced it themselves or knows someone that has gone through situations that are similar, to what these guys are going to be going through, and we're doing our best to emphasize those points too, the most relatable aspects of each of the characters, so that anyone, religious or not, who is a comic book fan or not, for that matter, whether you're religious or not, whether you enjoy comics or not, you should be able to pick up this book and walk away going, wow, that was better than I expected.
What feedback have you heard from people in the comic industry who
Well, it's funny.
either,
It's funny.
you know, religious or not, kind of, is it crossing over in that way?
Yeah, on a creative level, everybody we've talked to who's actually read the book is like, whoa, I thought this was going to really suck, but it was good, because it's like you said, whenever you say, well, it's inspired by a Bible story, everybody's like, oh man,
You think Davey and Goliath? Yeah.
yeah. They're like, yeah, I've
Right.
heard it, seen it, not interested. But folks who have read the book rave about it and are, the story's not a secret. It's there in the Bible, so you can go see what's going to happen next. But we do have a lot of folks who, like Baron Bell, the creator of Dominion. He's a man of faith, but his twin brother is not. And so he always jokes about, my brother is kind of the litmus test for if this sucks or not. Yeah. And so he gave it to his brother, and his brother's like, oh man, this is hot, man. This is the best stuff you've ever done. So that's kind of like our little clue that, hey, okay, I think we're on the right track. If Baron's brother, who doesn't care about the Bible, doesn't care about faith or any of that stuff, if he likes it, it's because there's great characters and there's great story and there's excellent art that's engaging. So mission accomplished.
Do you guys remember back in the 80s, there was an ad on TV or a PSA? I don't know if it was, but it was all this like deep voice, and it was like murder, romance, plagues, destruction, overthrowing, all these like very big terms of like the greatest book you'll ever read, the greatest story, and it was the Bible, right? But it was
I was going to say Dianetics. Okay,
well,
sorry.
yeah, no,
that
was a different one. But they ran quite close to each other, I might add.
There you go.
But it was the whole thing of like just repackaging it to just show that, I mean, the stories in the Bible, if you can get through the text and the way it's written,
the begatting.
Yes, the begatting. I mean, on top of obviously the message and what we learn from it, but there's some really good stories in there, which is exactly what you're doing, is you're packaging it in a way that people can digest it.
Yeah, there's some mind-blowing stories, and it's stories that I can relate to and that you can relate to. We see a little bit of ourselves in these,
but they're still interesting.
That's true. Absolutely. Some characters I don't really, relate to some of the characters at all. And there's so many like odd things in the Bible. Like there was a prophet that God told him to go marry a prostitute. He's like, what? Why do you want me to marry a prostitute? He's like, because the nation of Israel is like a prostitute, because every time another god walks by, they go, ooh, let me go get with this other god. And so God's upset about that. So he tells Hosea to, hey, go marry a prostitute and you'll be an example to the people of how I feel about all of this stuff. And you're just like, okay, and you kind of think about it. And there's so many stories like that. And these stories that we're telling are from the Old Testament. So there's talk about a story long, long ago in a land far away.
Oh yeah. There's a lot in that Old Testament.
And that's got to be the thing, I mean, to focus on, because I think, like you said earlier, Mark, the Bible is a bit of a spoiler for everything you're doing. So you have to find sort of different avenues to go down.
It's true.
So what else do you have coming out? You've got Samson, you've got Dominion.
Yep. We have Samson, we have Dominion, and we have some books in our backlog as in terms of our books we produced in the past. There's a great book called Radio Free America that Dr. Bell wrote as well. And, it's about the United States being attacked by foreign powers, invading, and it's about us as Americans coming together. The gangbangers in the hood and the police officers in the hood all come together to fight, the external powers that nuked us and EMP pulsed us and are coming in the tanks and the armored vehicles to kill us. So we come together as patriots. It's really a question, what does it mean to be a patriot? And but the cool thing when Barron pitched this to me, he's like, okay, so in Radio Free America, the way that they coordinate the resistance is they broadcast hip hop music and they encode messages in the beats and the scratches of the music. I was like, oh man, yes. So that's a great book. I wrote a book called Platypus versus Monkey. That's
What's that about?
It's Platypus versus Monkey is about. It started at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the former Soviet Union. They shot an R-7 rocket into space with a monkey test subject in the rocket, but it was hit by an asteroid and spun out into deep space, where just recently they found this. Some aliens found the ship, and they repaired the monkey who had frozen, decades ago. But they repaired his brain with data from his own ship, the Soviet ship that they found him in, and they shoot him back to his point of origin. So he ends up, crash landing in New York City and coming out of his little spaceship thinking it's his job to take over the world for the Soviet Union. So he starts rampaging through the city, and there's this little anthropomorphic platypus character that talks like Humphrey Bogart. He wears a suit and tie, and he drives an old Ford Falcon. And so
hard-boiled
it
detective
has brass
with a
knuckles and a
mustache.
45. Yeah. So that's basically what that story is about. And so it's more cartoony and more sort of absurd and fun.
Dominion, Samson Rise, and End of Darkness are available wherever you get your comic books, or you can order them directly from Terminus Media. For more information, check out their website, terminusmedia.com.
You can follow us on all the various socials. Our website is whythepodcast.com and has all sorts of additional stories and videos. It's also where you can sign up for our newsletter. We're also on YouTube if you're into that kind of thing. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, because if you don't, we'll call your mother and tell her that she's completely right. You would look so much prettier if you smiled more.
Why the Podcast is part of Mudhouse Media. Today's show was produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing executive producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our graphic designer is Samantha Mustonen. The theme song was performed by the Electrosynth-O-Magnetic Polyphonic Orchestra. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?